Good evening, and right before we dive into the main topic, I'd like to quickly mention that the censorship here on YouTube has once again reached another level. That's because they just removed my video exposing how the CDC bought the cell phone ping data of at least 44 million Americans in order to track how compliant they were with the COVID mandates. They just took down my interview with RFK Jr. on our Clips channel because of supposed misinformation. And just 2 days ago, one of our YouTube channels was given a strike, and they're not allowed to publish any videos for the next week because they dared to cover the IRS whistleblower who was exposing the Biden family before Congress. YouTube pulled down the video and gave that channel a strike, even though there was no commentary on that video. It was just quite literally the raw footage from the actual testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee. And also, given the fact that yesterday, Democrat members of Congress tried to censor a congressional panel on government censorship, well, quite frankly, it seems to me like this problem is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And so, if you are just as sick and tired of all this censorship as I am, you're potentially in luck, because the Epoch Times is extending our awesome sale on subscriptions, just 25 cents a week for the whole year, which, if you do the math, works itself out to just be $1 a month. And so if you've been on the fence, you've been thinking about it, you're not sure whether to subscribe or not, but you're 100% sure that you're fed up with this unbridled censorship and you're looking for a source of honest news, well, perhaps take this sale as an opportunity to try the Epoch Times for yourself. I'll throw the link to the sale page. It'll be right there at the top of the description box below. Just click on that link and you can try the Epoch Times for yourself for, again, just a single $1 a month. Now, jumping into today's main topic, the governor of California, Mr. Gavin Newsom, he is working to create for himself a national profile by proposing a 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Specifically, this would be a new amendment to the Constitution which would limit the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Here's specifically what Governor Newsom said when making the announcement regarding this proposal. Quote, "Our ability to make a more perfect union is literally written into the Constitution. So today, I'm proposing the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution to do just that. The 28th Amendment will enshrine in the Constitution common sense gun safety measures that Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and gun owners overwhelmingly support, while leaving the Second Amendment unchanged and respecting America's gun-owning tradition." Then, at the bottom of this proposal, he laid out 4 basic points that will be included in this particular amendment, which include raising the federal minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, mandating universal background checks, implementing a waiting period for all gun purchases, and then lastly, it would bar all American civilians from purchasing quote-unquote assault weapons that, and this is what the press release says, quote, "serve no other purpose than to kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time." Then, just to add a little bit of a visual to this announcement of his, I'd like to show you this. This is a video of Gavin Newsom walking down the street with a reporter telling her about the need to crack down on gun ownership. But if you notice, at the very same time, Gavin Newsom is surrounded by at least 3 armed security guards. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Regardless, in order for something like this to actually be added to the U.S. Constitution, well, there are 2 possible routes. One is that you have 2/3 of all U.S. senators and U.S. congressmen vote in favor of this amendment, and then afterwards, you'll need the state legislatures of at least 38 states to approve it. The other option is that the state legislatures of 33 different states agree to hold a constitutional convention, after which you'll again need the state legislatures of at least 38 states to approve it. Meaning that no matter how you slice it, you would need to win over 3/4 of the states in this country to get this particular amendment passed. And based on how things have shifted over the past 30 years, that doesn't really appear to be possible. And in fact, what appears to be happening is the exact opposite, which is that there is a wave of more and more states actually broadening their Second Amendment protections. Because you see, despite the narrative coming down from the mainstream media, over the past 3 decades, so many states have become constitutional carry states that they now comprise a majority of the country. Now, in case you're not aware, over the past 30 years, in regards to being able to legally conceal carry a gun, the states in America fell into 4 separate categories. You had shall issue states, meaning that in order to conceal carry a gun, you needed to get a permit, but you would get the permit as long as you applied for it and met the state's general criteria. It would be similar to getting a state ID. Then you had what were known as may issue states. These were states where you had to apply for a concealed carry permit, but whether you got that permit or not was up to the discretion of local authorities. And so you might have met all the criteria, but if the local police chief didn't think that you needed a gun, you wouldn't get one. Then there were no issue states where you just couldn't get a concealed carry permit no matter what. And then lastly, there were constitutional carry states. Within the borders of these states, the idea was that you did not need a permit to carry a gun, because essentially the US Constitution was your permit, particularly the Second Amendment. And what has happened over the past 30-odd years is that, for one, there's no more such a thing as no-issue states. Almost all of the may-issue states have become shall-issue states. And again, constitutional carry has exploded across the country. And the best way to see how this all played out is by looking at a map of America through time. This is what the country looked like back in 1986. As you can see, the overwhelming majority of the states were either no-issue states in red, or they were may-issue states in yellow. That means in 1986, in the bulk of the country, you either could not legally conceal carry a gun outside your home, or you had to get the permission of some local authority in order to do so. Then, if we look back at the map in 1986, you had a few states that were shall issue, the ones in blue, and then you had the one lone state in green, which was Vermont, and it was the only state in the nation to have constitutional carry. And by the way, that is why some people refer to constitutional carry as Vermont carry, because back then it was the only state to have that sort of a policy. However, let's see what happens when we begin to move the clock forward on that particular map. As you can see, over time, more and more states became shall issue states, meaning that everyone who met the criteria was allowed to conceal carry. And as you can see, by the mid-1990s, shall issue states became the majority. And by the mid-2000s, they became the overwhelming majority. However, something fascinating began taking place in the year 2010. This was when a wave of constitutional carry laws started to sweep the nation. And within the span of about 10 or so years, over half the country became constitutional carry, wherein, again, the Second Amendment to the US Constitution is the only quote-unquote permit that you need to carry a gun. And so, to really appreciate the change that's taken place over the last 30 years, let's look at two maps side by side. In 1986, you had 16 no-issue states, 25 may-issue states, 8 shall-issue states, and only Vermont was a constitutional carry state. However, 37 years later, you have 0 no-issue states, 8 may-issue states, and those are all, by the way, being challenged legally after a Supreme Court decision. You have 15 shall-issue states, and then you have 27 constitutional carry states. All right, I'd like to take a super quick moment and introduce the sponsor of today's episode, Gundry MD, which is an awesome company founded by Dr. Stephen Gundry, a cardiologist, a heart surgeon, as well as the director for the Center of Restorative Medicine. And Dr. Gundry's big thing is to educate the public about a certain condition called leaky gut, which, according to his research, is largely caused by a toxin that comes into people's bodies when they eat all of this quote-unquote healthy food, the exact types of food that they have been taught to eat by the fraudulent food pyramid. And by the way, just as an aside, outside of this ad, the food pyramid that's been pushed onto this country by the federal government for the last 5 or 6 decades is indeed quite fraudulent, but that's a bigger topic for another day. Now, leaky gut syndrome is something that millions of Americans experience every single year. And some warning signs of it include things like weight gain, fatigue, problems with your digestive tract, stiff and achy joints, and even certain types of skin problems. And while a lot of those just sound like the normal signs of aging, according to Dr. Gundry, it's easy to conflate the signs of a leaky gut with just the normal signs of aging, because leaky gut takes a long time, sometimes several years, to actually develop. And so people often conflate the two. However, according to Dr. Gundry's research, you can actually fix the problem at its root if you know which exact toxins in which exact foods are causing it. And so if you'd like to learn more about this leaky gut condition, as well as Dr. Gundry's research into what's really causing it, you can simply head on over to gutcleanseprotocol.com/Roman. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Roman, and watch the video that Dr. Gundry put together. It's a free video that Dr. Gundry put together where he goes point by point through all of his research. The link to it will also be down in the description box below. Dr. Gundry, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. And now let's head on back to the studio. That is potentially the most stark contrast that you can possibly imagine. It's like night and day. And so the idea that you would get 2/3 of these states to agree to discuss a gun limiting amendment, and then subsequently get 3/4 of those states, a supermajority, to agree to this 28th Amendment, well, it does not really jive with the reality of what's been taking place across the country. Furthermore, it's not just the state governments that are loosening up their gun carry restrictions. The American people themselves are buying guns at a record rate. In fact, since the year 2000, where the country saw an unprecedented number of mostly peaceful protests, well, the number of gun purchases has just skyrocketed. And if you remember, at that time, the protests/riots were breaking out in cities across the country, and the police were so outnumbered and underfunded that people were essentially left to fend for themselves. And so it was amidst that the number of gun sales in the country went just through the roof. Now, it's not exactly possible to know how many gun purchases are made in America, but we can use the number of background checks as a good proxy. And when you look at that data, well, you see a giant jump in the year 2000, which tapered out a bit over the next 2 years, but if you look, the sales numbers are still much higher than they were before. Furthermore, in regards to first-time gun buyers, well, here's what a recent study found. Quote, a scholarly study found that 7.5 million Americans became new gun owners between 2019 and 2021. Those purchases exposed 17 million Americans to household firearms for the first time, a figure that includes 5 million children. The study found that many Americans who already own guns, nearly 20 million, bought more. And so, that's all to say that despite this push to get a gun-restrictive 28th Amendment passed, judging by the data, there is no way for that to happen. Because people might respond to a survey or a poll in a certain way, but you can't really hide the facts. And the facts are that the majority of this country votes for state lawmakers which have overwhelmingly enacted constitutional carry laws, and then the people themselves are buying guns at the fastest rate that the nation has ever seen. If you'd like to go deeper into the data from today's episode, I'll throw all my research notes. They will be down in the description box below this video for you to check out, which is, of course, I will mention that little description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you take a quick moment to smash so that this video and this content can reach ever more people via the beautiful YouTube algorithm. And then lastly, as I mentioned at the top of the episode as well, if you would like to try the Epoch Times for yourself and get unlimited access to everything, all of our articles, all of our infographics, all of the shows, movies, and documentaries on Epoch TV, basically everything we publish, well, now is a great time with the awesome sale that we're running. I'll throw a link to that sale page. It'll be right there at the top of the description box below. You can just click on that link and sign up for just $1 a month and try the Epoch Times for yourself. I'm sure you'll love it. Again, the link is right there at the top of the description box below. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.